Hi, this is Don from WEST SYSTEM Epoxy. Today I want to talk about vacuum bagging. Vacuum bagging is a process using atmospheric pressure to consolidate FRP laminates to help lower void content and to have a higher fiber volume ratio and improve core installation. It provides even clamping pressure and clamping force for a complex shape. The setup that I'm going to show is common to a wet layup, marine-oriented composites. Aerospace and pre-preg laminates may use a slightly different process. I'm going to demonstrate vacuum bagging on this mold today because I have it in the shop. I know it is airtight. If you have a fiberglass boat that needs a repair and you're going to vacuum bag the repair, you just got to make sure that that area is airtight so when you draw the bag down, it does not leak. So I have this mold prepared with a release agent. We have two release agents that we have in our shop. The first one is a paste wax from Rexall called Pardal Paste Wax number 2. And then we use a chemical release from Chemtrim it's just a wipe-on release agent. So this next step that we're going to use is sealant tape. We're going to put this down on the surface before I mix any epoxy while the surface is clean and free of any contaminants, because the reason for the sealant tape is to ensure that the vacuum bag film makes good contact with the mold surface for an airtight seal. This sealant tape and the other vacuum consumables that I'll talk about are available in our vacuum bag kit. So as I'm applying the sealant tape, I want to work it down so it makes very good contact with the mold surface. I kind of run my hand over top of the edge. The reason why it's peeled back here is so I can start my next layer and I overlap it about a ½ inch onto the existing tape, so it creates a very good seal. So just pull the paper back about an inch, and then we take the sealant tape and put it right over top of it and kind of press it down with your thumb and just work the sealant tape down so it makes very good contact with the mold surface. Then you just fold the paper back over top of the sealant tape so you keep it covered so it's protected. So what I'm going to do now is take flash tape and put over top of the sealant tape because it just has a paper back that can absorb epoxy. So this is going to keep the surface nice and clean. So when we're ready to put the bag down, we create a good seal. I'm brushing on an even coat of WEST SYSTEM Epoxy on the mold surface to ensure thorough wet out of my fiberglass. I'm spreading the epoxy in multiple directions to make sure I have even distribution of epoxy on the mold. As I'm applying the fiberglass, I'm working it with a plastic spreader at a low angle to remove any wrinkles so it makes good contact with the mold surface and is completely wet out with the epoxy. The vacuum bag process will not compensate for a poorly wet out laminate, it just provides compaction. I'm brushing on a heavy coat of epoxy to make sure the curves in the foam are filled during the vacuum bag process. I'll wet out the back side of my high density foam core with unthickened epoxy before applying fiberglass. I'm going to apply a couple more layers of fiberglass over the foam. The layers of fiberglass will be applied one at a time to make sure it is completely wet out with the epoxy. And I'll repeat the process for my second layer. Running a plastic spreader over the fiberglass will ensure thorough wet out and contact with the foam core. So now that we have our lamination on the mold surface, now we're ready to install our vacuum consumables. This first material is a release fabric. This is a tightly woven nylon material that has a release agent on the surface, so once the epoxy cures it won't bond to it, and to ensure that you fully removed it, these red lines are called tracers to visually see that you have removed it, and it does leave a textured surface. So now I'm going to install the release fabric on the surface, and what I'm trying to do is remove any wrinkles in the release fabric, so I'm kind of working it out to the edges. And you can kind of pull the release fabric and manipulate it so you can remove the wrinkles and kind of work it with your hand, just so it makes good contact with that wet laminate. And you will want the release fabric to extend past the laminate by about 1 to 2 inches. And one advantage to that is once it does cure, you'll have an area to actually pull up to pull it off the surface. So that looks good. I'll just trim the end here. The next vacuum consumable that I'm going to apply is a perforated film. We don't offer it in our vacuum bag kit, and it is optional to use. It's a good idea to use depending on the application. What it is it's a plastic film that has small perforations in it. This one is a P3. It has holes that are spaced about 1/2 inch apart, and this controls how much resin will come through it to maintain a good resin to fiber ratio for your laminate. There are other perforation patterns out there on the market that can be used for more advanced composite applications. Now that we have our perforated film on the surface, the next consumable that we have is our breather fabric. This is a non-woven fabric that has a structure that doesn't completely collapse. When it's under the bag, it lets air move towards the vacuum pump. It also absorbs excess epoxy that is being compressed out of the laminate. I chose to do 2 layers to ensure that it doesn't fully saturate and to allow air movement over the entire area. So now we're to our last material. This is our vacuum bag film. This is actually going to be used to fully encapsulate our entire area to draw it under atmospheric pressure. This is a very strong airtight film that's actually nylon reinforced. So what I'm going to do is pull the flash tape off the paper of the sealant tape. So I expose the sealant tape so I can actually install the vacuum bag film. So now we're ready to install the vacuum bag, and there's a couple things you want to think about when putting the bag on. And one thing is you want to ensure that you have the bag large enough that's larger than your part, usually about 30% larger. And the reason for it is you don't want the bag to bridge corners. So if there's a change in height, seeing that we're doing a composite panel so it's higher than the mold surface, we want to make sure that that bag gets into the inside corners. Seeing that we're putting excess bag on the surface, we're going to have to actually pleat the bag. So a pleat is a fold in a film that needs to be sealed, so when we draw it under vacuum it's airtight. So you'll use sealant tape to go inside the film to ensure that that's sealed. So that may vary on the size of the pleat depending on how much excess bag that you have on the part. So when I put the bag down, I'll just tack it a little bit in the center here. To give enough bag, I'm going to put a pleat in this area right here. I'll actually take the bag and I'll fold it back on itself. And when I install the sealant tape, I like to actually go down onto the surface about 1/2 inch and put it right back up onto the bag film. So when I pull the paper off, I just kind of fold it over top of itself. Kind of work it down with your thumb. And then from there we'll just stop and we'll put another pleat about the same distance in the other direction. And you kind of want to put a little tension on the bag to make it tight so you avoid any wrinkles in the bag, and kind of work it down with your finger. And you just pull the tape, then just kind of make the sealant tape fall back right on top of itself. And just kind of manipulate the bag so it's nice. So now there's no wrinkles in the pleat. And you want your bag to kind of stay in line, kind of parallel with the sealant tape. So we'll run it all the way across here. And from there, you got to ensure that you have enough bag to make it to the other side. So we may actually start here, then work the way this way. So now We can take some sealant tape and collapse it like that and get your finger up underneath of it. And you just have to kind of manipulate the bag so there's no wrinkles. Then you just go in and pull the paper away. And from there you just press it together. And there you create a nice little pleat there. And we'll do the same thing opposite over here. I usually like the pleats about the same height so the bag goes at the same rate across the part. So we'll come to this corner and we'll work the bag towards the corner. And I'll have a nice small little pleat opposite of the one on the other side. And now we're kind of working the bag to make sure we have enough bag to get into any inside corner, which from what I can see we have plenty of bag. And you kind of manipulate the bag over the area. Now we'll just take our finger and kind of work along the inside of the sealant tape. And a lot of times when you have areas that overlap, they like to leak, so you kind of have to press it down to compact it. Now we're actually ready to hook our vacuum pump up to it. So I'm going to actually take a hose from the vacuum pump and actually go to a suction cup, and we'll put the suction cup right in the middle of the area. So to ensure that we know that we're putting the suction cup at, because I got to put a hole in the bag, we're actually going to see the area. So just a circle here, and right in that area that I made the X is where I'm going to cut the bag. So I put my suction cup right over top of that area. So just a utility knife works for this, and just lightly cut the bag. So before I hook the hose up to the vacuum pump, I want to talk about what we have here. So here's our suction cup that's going to go onto the bag. Then in line, I put a T. So this is actually a catch area. So if for some reason you were to put excess epoxy in here and it gets absorbed into your line, this is the area that it would be caught to before it actually would get to your vacuum pump. So this is good practice to have. Then from there, this line will actually go to your vacuum pump, and then you turn your vacuum pump on and draw vacuum down. One thing you do want to keep in mind is that you want to gradually draw the bag down. You want to turn it on, manipulate the bag so it gets to any inside corners, so you're not bridging any areas, and then draw the bag down. On the gauge, this is measured in inches of mercury, so what you'd want to shoot for is right around 10 to 15 inches of mercury. So on our vacuum pump, we have a dial so it can bleed off vacuum to maintain that pressure, and that is in the range of about 5 to 7 pounds per square inch, and that's equal pressure over the entire area. So it's very good compaction, and that's why we can get that excess epoxy to go into the breather. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to draw the bag down slowly, and then I'll install the vacuum gauge. Before we put the vacuum pump on our part, we have a few different vacuum pumps up here I want to talk about. This first one is actually a diaphragm pump. This is actually a gas pump. It's an oilless pump which actually can run continuously, and this is the one that we'll use today for the part. And then the other one that I have up here is actually a rotary vane pump. This has an oil reservoir that may actually emit oil, and it's not designed to run continuously. So just got to keep that in mind. The other thing too is you don't want to overcompensate for a higher CFM pump when your part may be leaking. So you want to take the time to ensure that the bag is well sealed and not have to rely on a very high CFM pump to draw the bag down. Because what that may do, you may actually draw the epoxy out of the part because you're pulling so much vacuum and that excess is going into the breather. And if you have a leak, it's letting air in, so you're entraining air into your laminate. So it's not a good thing. We do recommend that you draw the bag down about 10 to 15 inches of mercury, and what that gets you in the range is about 5 to 7 pounds per square inch. And that eliminates taking too much epoxy out of the laminate. The other thing that I have up here is actually a vacuum venturi that we have on our WEST System line. This is used with an air compressor, so you'd plumb in an air compressor to it, then come off the line to your part. This is used for a lot smaller parts. So this vacuum venturi comes in our vacuum bag kit. These pumps that we have up here are easy to find online. So now that we have the pump hooked up to the area and I have the suction cup on here, you kind of just want to hold the suction cup until you evacuate the air underneath the bag. So now we just manipulate the bag so it gets into those inside corners. So now that we're gradually drawing the bag down, right now on my vacuum pump it's saying about 8 inches of mercury, and I can hear that I have a leak in the bag. This is near the pleat over here. So I kind of will go along and kind of work the bag. Now we're ready to install the vacuum gauge, because now it's pulling over 10 inches and I want to ensure that this is in the range of about 10 to 15 inches of mercury. So we'll mark out the area. The reason why I'm installing it right here is we want to be kind of the furthest distance away from where your vacuum line is coming into the part. Putting it right here is definitely perfectly fine to do. You can actually come off the area with some breather and go onto that and put it down, but you want to make sure it goes down to a nice flat surface. So I'll just cut the bag here, and now it'll pull down, and we'll take a look at our vacuum gauge. So now that we take a look at our vacuum gauge, it's pulling 15 inches of mercury, which is going to calculate out to 7 psi over the entire area, and that's 7 pounds per square inch. So now that we have the bag on the surface, one thing that you may notice is some like dark spots on the breather, and what that is excess epoxy that's coming through the perf film. That's completely normal, so it's not an issue. It's just being absorbed into the breather. So now that we have our bag down and we vacuum bag down the part, I hope you found that this is very helpful for you, the whole vacuum bagging process with all the consumables. We do offer a manual, a vacuum bagging techniques manual, free of charge, that you can download on our website, westsystem.com. And feel free to let us know if you have any questions. You can give us a call. And thank you for watching.